Good morning and welcome to Wisdom of the World. Today I'm going to tell a story. It's actually a very old story. It's more than 500 years old. And it is a place in England. And it goes like this. Oh, it is called The Mute Wife. And it goes like this. In the fair and fine city of Norwich in England, there lived a rich businessman. A man who made his money by buying and selling wool. A thriving trade in the time of King Henry, and his children was very good at his business. He was so good that he had many great chests of gold. And at the same time, this rich businessman was no miser. He was not stingy. He loved to spend the money, and so he bought a fair house in the shadow of Norwich Castle. In that house, he had fine tapestries on the walls, and many not so fair and fine servants to do his bidding. The rich businessman wore fair and fine clothes, certainly much finer than any of you reading the story today. And that rich businessman also had a fair and fine young wife called Elizabeth. Elizabeth. She was beautiful. Some said she was the most beautiful woman in the whole of Norwich, while others said no, she was the most beautiful woman in the whole of England. You cannot get a woman more beautiful than that. The businessman, however, knew better, for he felt certain that she was the most beautiful young woman in the whole of the world. Perhaps he was right, for her hair was the color of the brightest summer sun on the brightest of summer days. Her skin was as soft as duck down and as smooth as marble. Her lips were redder than the reddest ruby ever plucked from the earth, or the reddest rose ever plucked from the bush, as she smelled, just as sweet. And last, though, there was a problem with Elizabeth. And the problem was, she was mute. Never had a word passed her lips, which bothered the businessman greatly, and he longed to hear her speak. He felt certain that if his fair and fine young wife could speak, then surely her voice would also be fair and fine. He felt certain that if Elizabeth could talk, her voice would be like the birds singing in the trees, or even the very angels singing to the glory of God in heaven above. And so it was that he became very sad that she never said a word. He was not, however, sad all the time, for the businessman went to visit the bars every night. You would always find him in a bar with his many friends. But on this evening, he came to the bar early, and there was no one but the barkeeper and a stranger to the city. A very strange stranger indeed. For when he thought about it later, the businessman could remember no detail of the man, but only that he wore a dark cloak and a dark hood which covered his face. And so they sat, the rich merchant on one side of the table and the stranger on the other, and now they caught each other's gaze. The stranger glimpsed the sadness just in the corner of the businessman's eye, and he asked him, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so sad?" And the businessman said, "I have the most beautiful wife in the whole of England. Her hair is the color of the brightest summer sun. Her skin is as soft as duck down and as smooth as marble." "But," said the merchant, "she is mute. She cannot speak, and I wish that she could talk. For I feel certain that if she could talk, her voice would match the birds singing in the trees, or be like the very angels singing to the glory of God." "That is," said the businessman, "why I am sad." Well, the hooded stranger began to laugh. "Is that your problem?" asked he. "Oh, that's no problem at all." And now the stranger reached into his pockets and he pulled out a small bone, what looked like a human bone, perhaps from a finger or even a toe. But the businessman thought it better not to ask. "Take this bone home and bind it with a lock of your own hair," said the stranger. "Then put it beneath your sleeping wife's tongue from 1 hour before midnight to exactly 1 hour after midnight. No more, no less." The businessman was so desperate to hear his young wife speak that he followed the stranger's instructions to the letter. At 1 o'clock in the morning, he plucked the bone from beneath his wife's sleeping tongue. He kissed her gently and tried to settle down to sleep. But this night, sleep would not find him, for he was desperate to know if his wife had won her voice. He was desperate to know if that voice was finer than the birds singing in the trees, or the very angels singing to the glory of God in heaven. And so it was that he sat up in bed, and he kissed his wife a second time upon the cheek. "Wake, Elizabeth," he whispered. "Arise yourself, Elizabeth." Well, slowly, oh so very slowly, the young wife began to awaken in the most fair and fine and beautiful fashion. Eyelids fluttered in a fair and fine fashion. She sat up in bed and she stretched and she yawned so beautifully. Slowly, oh so very slowly, Elizabeth turned to her husband and she spoke. It was the first time that the beautiful young woman had ever spoken. "What the hell do you think you are doing waking me up at this time?" she screeched. And now she scolded her husband, calling him fool and say all kinds of outrageous words, too earthy to mention here in the story. Her fair and fine mouth had become a dunghill of filthiness. She harassed her husband for a full hour or more until he could bear it no longer. He got up early and went to his place of business. But the merchant did return home that night, for he felt certain that, given time, both Elizabeth and her new tongue would settle down. Alas, though, as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, this fair and fine young wife developed an evil disposition. "What do you think you are doing staying out all night?" she screamed. "You think more of your friends than you do of me?" And then there was her tongue. He had never seen a tongue as busy as hers. And the businessman compared her tongue to a sharp blade. For every time she yelled at him, it cut that man to the bone. Oh, how he could wish he could bury that knife. How he wished he could shut up his scolding wife. And so it was in desperation that he went in search of the hooded stranger again. And when he at last found them drinking in a house, a bar, he fell to his knees and he begged the stranger, "Please, please, please, take back my scolding wife's voice." But the stranger shook his head and he said he could not. He stood up and throwing off his hood, he spoke once more. "Know this, rich businessman of Norwich, I am not really a man, for I am a demon from hell. And like any demon from down below, I can work all kinds of spells, including giving the gift of speech. But know this, rich businessman," said the demon, "neither I, nor any demon from hell, why, not even the very devil himself, can shut up a woman once she has started." That's the end of the story.